apologies for lateness from Councillor Campbell, who will be joining us shortly. We have no requests for leave of absence.
I'm here from the beginning.
Morning, Councillor Campbell. Thank you. Welcome. And just again, thank you for everyone for persevering with Zoom. I know it is challenging. We live at one end of the district to the other, and there are challenges with connectivity throughout the district. So well done for getting this far. So we can move straight to item 4, which is the confirmation of minutes, and you'll find those on page 6. If I could have a mover and a seconder for those, please.
Your Worship, I move that the minutes of the council meeting held 19 August 2021 be adopted as a true and correct record.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against? That motion is carried. Thank you. Right, so going through our agenda, declarations of interest. Do any of our members need to declare potential conflict with any of the items on the agenda today? No? Great, we can move on. So no public forum, no presentations, and no notification of late items. So we can go straight to item 9. We're on page 13. And the first one up, 9.1, this is the Community Development Committee. This is the partnership with our faith community. You will recall this was an action in our community development strategy. And so the community development team have had the opportunity to look at this and discuss it. And so I'll hand it over to Michael Hawker to introduce this to us, and then maybe Hilary and Heather, Councillor Humphrey and Councillor G. Taylor may wish to make further comment.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the introduction. This has been a key piece of new work for Janine, and working with multiple faith communities, and a very nice presentation along the way. So I'll leave it now for Councillor Humphrey and Janine to provide more information about that.
Thanks, Michael. Councillor Humphrey.
Your Worship, I think you've covered off the background really successfully. I was actually on leave for other business last week. So in terms of being able to provide context to the discussion of the Community Development Committee and the recommendation, I'm going to pass straight to Councillor G. Taylor.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor G. Taylor.
Cool. Thanks, Councillor Humphrey. We all thought that this was a great piece of work at the Community Development Committee meeting, and fully support what has been achieved. The only sort of issue that we had was that all traditional and non-traditional faith groups were approached to participate in the survey, and it was mainly the traditional groups that came back to us. So it was a bit of a shame that we didn't get a full range of feedback. That was our only sort of discussion that we had around this piece of work. But we all see that this is extremely important to get the information out to our people, and Feilding District Promotion to not have this on their website is a bit of a shame. So going forward, that's what we discussed at the Community Development Committee, was that we want to make this information public and readily available. And moving forward, just sort of dabble around the space of if we can engage more with the non-traditional church groups in the future. So that was sort of where we were, where our discussions were at last Thursday.
Excellent, thank you. Janine, did you want to add anything else to that? You were leading that work out.
Good morning, Your Worship. Yes, just for the council members' information, the reason why this has come before you is that you might recall that it is an action within our community development strategy to actually build on our faith community and build that relationship, aside from having them come along to our council meetings and open with prayer. So this was one way that we could acknowledge the work that they do within our community, and you'll be able to see from the attachment that they actually do provide a great support to our community, which, as I had noted for our Community Development Committee members, sometimes goes under the council's radar, but definitely would go under our public's radar. So this is one way of just acknowledging that great service in a public manner.
Thank you. Open it for questions and comments. Councillor Casey.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I think Janine's actually summed it up really well, almost stole the words out of my mouth. It's just during the reading the report and hearing the report, we're just reminded of all the great work that goes on behind the scenes with our faith groups. And quite rightly so, I guess they prefer underneath the radar without any fuss, but it's just an amazing, I guess, support to the community that goes on, and it's just great to have it actually recorded, actually down on paper. So it's great.
Excellent, thank you. Are there any other further questions or comments? Councillor G. Taylor.
I was just gonna sneak on in there and put the recommendations up, if that's all right.
Thank you. Yes, you're welcome. There's 3 recommendations there.
Okay, so I recommend that the council include the Faith Community Survey results for 2021 on the council's website, that the council arrange for a paid feature in the Feilding Herald to acknowledge the social and community work that is being undertaken in our district by our faith community, and that the council include on its website a register of faith organisations, which includes their locations, contacts, and regular times of worship.
Thank you, and I see Councillor Casey has seconded that. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, or raise your hand. Thank you. Against? That motion, those motions are carried. And I support the comments. It's great to formally acknowledge the work that our faith communities do, and it's really appropriate that we do this at this time with under lockdown and the work that they will be doing in our communities. So I appreciate that and thank you. So we move to item 10 and we're on page 18. These are the minutes from other committees for our information, and the first one up is the Audit and Risk Committee. Their draft minutes. I'll ask Councillor Campbell if you'd like to speak to those.
Happy to note them as read. I think they're fairly accurate recording of the meeting. It was always nice as part of the work of the committee to go and visit some of council's work sites, which we've continued to do. We went and had a look at the animal control facility this month, which was very good, and they presented to us at that meeting. Other than that, we just reviewed the quarterly report, which is noted, and I think we've dealt with that one. No, nothing else to comment on, I think.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to make a question or a comment in relation to that report, those minutes? Councillor Quarry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I'd like to make a comment in regard to the nursery. Once again, I call for the nursery figures to be published and put forward towards the full council so we can analyse the efficiency of the nursery and whether it is worth retaining as we go forward. I see it has been moved into the wastewater treatment facilities. To me, it will be lost in the mire that is the wastewater plant, and there will be no separation of the accounts from the nursery, which we can analyse in the future.
Thank you. Can I get a comment, please, from Shane, our Chief Executive, on this?
No, that's even though we've shifted the responsibility of the nursery into infrastructure, it's still a separate reporting line as council requested in our accounts. So that won't merge, it will stay as a separate reporting line, both there and in the quarterly report.
Thank you. And can you, either yourself or through Hamish, give us an update on when we're likely to get a next updated report on the nursery?
I'll pass to Hamish for that.
Haven't got a specific date in mind, but there is quite a bit of work being done around forward orders and sort of locking in the revenue for the current and next financial year. So I'll probably take a lead from Shane in terms of when we want to formally report that, or whether it's a workshop discussion, but it's very much a looking forward conversation as opposed to a looking back. So happy to take a lead on that, but it can be produced at any time. I think given the nature of some of the conversations, probably a workshop update is appropriate.
Thank you. I think it has been something that's been raised a few times now, so it would be good to get an update on where the nursery's at and where it's going to. So if we could put that in place for a future workshop, please.
Yeah. Just to elaborate a little bit on what Hamish is saying, Hamish is in conversations and negotiations with other entities for us to enter into a commercial agreement for plants, which will generate additional revenue. Those negotiations are commercially sensitive at this stage because of the nature and where they are. So we just need to be a little bit careful about the information that we do release until those negotiations are somewhat down the track.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Is there any other comments in relation to the audit and risk draft minutes? No? Right, we can move on, but having noted the workshop on the update for the nursery. So we go to item 11, the officers' reports. We're on 11.1, we're on page 24. This is our gambling venues policy. You will have seen in the notes that back in late 2020, we did indicate our preference to roll this policy over. And so this is the opportunity. It's come back to us now to see if that is still our wish to do that, or whether we wish to make any changes to it, and those are outlined in the report. So I'll hand over to Michael to introduce, please.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, you've outlined and summarised it very well, and Georgia Etheridge is online and ready to just take you through the details of the report, and also acknowledging the significant contribution that Carol's team have also made to this report. All for you now, Georgia.
Welcome, Georgia.
Good morning. Sorry about my very weird lighting. I've been sitting here for the last couple of weeks, but it's the first day it's this sunny. So I'm here to present with the draft gambling venues policy and the social impact assessment. The policy is prepared to cover council's requirements under both the Racing Industry Act 2020 and the Gambling Act 2003. So council is required to hold policies regarding both the establishment of TAB venues and venues that have electronic gambling machines. As the last review took place in 2018 and council is required to review the policies every 3 years, it's now due. And the social impact assessment is included because both pieces of legislation require council to consider the social impact of gambling as part of the review. The key findings are covered in more detail in the report, but include that the number of electronic gambling machines in the district has been fairly stable since the last review. So there are 5 venues with 81 machines. And there are no standalone TAB venues in the district, but 3 TAB outlets operate within pubs and taverns, and they also operate gambling machines in the same venue. The existing venues are located within medium and medium-high deprivation areas, but those areas are also the ones that are most compatible, being more central business areas rather than in residential areas. The proceeds in the Manawatu district are generally lower than the national average, but the proportion of residents within the district who have sought help for problem gambling has increased and is generally higher than the national average, but it's still under 1% of the district's total population. And we don't have enough information at the moment to figure out exactly why that increase has come about. But as you mentioned, in 2020, council had indicated the preference to roll over the existing conditions, and those conditions are outlined in section 3.2 of the report. So the draft policy has been prepared with the existing conditions. The amendments that have been made just reflect the change in legislation. The Racing Act 2003 was updated with the Racing Industry Act 2020. what council is required to do and the powers that council have are exactly the same, just the section references are different. There's also a couple of changed definitions in the district plan, and the job title of the authorised officer has changed. That's what we've changed, and I'll pass it to you for any questions or discussion.
Thank you. I see Carol's put a message up on chat. Carol, would you just like to talk us through that?
Yeah, I was just saying there really that difficult to measure. No one's really, and the DIA are aware of this, but online gambling is actually increasing, and it's very difficult to measure the effects of that. So that could link to the increase in requests for help that's not through the physical machines, but more online.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Right, so let's open it for questions and discussion. Any questions or comments? I guess the key thing is...
if I may, Your Worship.
Councillor Hadfield, yes.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, look, I was a bit interested in the fact that the problem gambling was higher than the national average, but Carol's explanation sort of does make some sense, really, given that the revenue from our gambling machines is lower than the national average. So it would tend to suggest that there are, you know, other factors in play here. But, you know, look, in principle, other than that, you know, I support the status quo, to be fair.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Marsh.
Just point 4.2 in the document start, and given the fact that Gerald has now started as of Monday, should we probably change the editing on that? And secondly, just, yeah, I noted with interest a very good article in the Dominion stuff yesterday, Dave Armstrong, just around exactly this and the fact of tough choices over proceeds from pokies. And the fact that nearly between 50 and 60% of the revenue from pokies is completely and utterly lost and does not come back into the community. And just a very good point in my view, in the fact that here we are, it's actually a money-making venture by 23 to 25% back to the people that actually have the pokies in their business. They're the ones making the money out of it rather than the community in a lot of cases. Just a point to note.
Thank you. Councillor Short.
Thank you. Sorry, I had to leave the room for the first bit, so I didn't hear Carol's presentation. Just that since the time I've been a councillor, I can't recall us having any serious problems with gambling venues, and actually we've had a steady decline of both venues and machines in our district. But I've always remembered a presentation that we did have from the Gambling Foundation where they said, don't forget, the other challenge that we have now is online gambling, and that's usually overseas based, and DIA has no way of monitoring that. And I've actually noticed on television in the last week or two, quite late at night, there are actually some advertisements for overseas online gambling sites being shown on television to the people in our district. So if we get too tight on venues, they will find other ways and they will go online, and that could be way more serious.
Thank you. It's a good point. And also, if they go online, the money's not coming back into our community through grants for community projects. Councillor Ford.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to support the status quo. However, the increase in problem gambling interventions has gone from about 30 to 190 in a very, very short period of time. I know we've just discussed it, and it partly may be online, but I would just like to perhaps dig a little bit deeper. It's not a condition of my support for what we're about to do, but it is quite concerning that it has gone from 130 to 190-ish.
Thank you. Councillor Quarry.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. You know, I'd like to support the comments of Councillor Short. Those of us who have been on council for a while, we've thrashed this topic on a number of occasions, and really it's just been rolled over. And yeah, I can't see any requirements to change what we already have.
Thank you. Is there any further comments? If I can't see your hand, just please speak up. None? Right, so we do have a recommendation on page 21.
Excuse me, Your Worship, we seem to have frozen.
Yeah. Might have to Michael step in until Her Worship can get, oh, here she comes.
Are you there, Helen?
Yes, I'm sorry, it's coming up saying it's unstable. So if I lose you, Councillor Ford will take over. But Councillor Marsh, were you to put that recommendation?
Yes, I can do. Just bear with me.
Page 24.
Yep, that the council adopt the gambling venues policy as set out in Appendix 1 of the report of the Acting General Manager. Do we need the Acting General Manager? Community and Strategy dated 22nd of July 2021.
Yes, we do need that with the vacancies still being progressed. So thank you. We have that moved. Is there a seconder, please? I'm happy to second that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye or raise your right hands.
Aye.
Thank you. Against? Thank you. That motion is carried. So we move on to 11.2. We're on page 71. And this is our budget carried forward requests. And this is the expenditure from last year, seeking to carry it forward for the various projects which are outlined in there. And so looking to Amanda or Shane, if you would like to take us through this, please.
I'm guessing it will be me. I'm just looking across at Shane's still muted. Good morning. So yes, as Your Worship has outlined, it is about our budgeted carry forwards. So projects that were budgeted to happen in the last financial year either are in progress and require the funds to complete them, or have been delayed and require the funds for this year or for next year. You'll note we have outlined the library and the administration building to be pushed into the next financial year, with a small budget for this year of around 200k to carry on with any design or consultancy work. If the work progresses quicker than that, then of course we'll be coming back to council to bring that budget forward. But at this stage, it feels more like the work would progress in the next financial year. Predominantly, if you're looking at the list around CapEx, about $9 million of it is renewals. So that's renewal funded from our depreciation fund. Around 9 million is new capital work. That includes the Ohakia Rural Water Scheme and some of the Three Waters projects that were funded by the reform. So only around, I think when I looked it up, was about 4.5 mil actually comes from loan funding. We don't require a new resolution for that loan funding because you have the debt resolution from last year for that spend. And there's around $5 million of growth works sitting in the carry forward list as well. And those growth works, of course, are funded by your development contributions and are part of the normal program around that. The delegations policy allows for most of the items on that list to have been approved by the GM or the Chief Executive under the delegations policy. However, some of the larger ones, over 500,000, need to come to council. And for completeness, it's better to bring the whole list to you. What else have I got in there? That's probably all I have. The quick process around how this comes to you. The budget managers at year end identify what is committed and needing to be carried forward, or what hasn't been spent yet to be carried forward. From there, it goes to the general manager to review and recommend, I suppose you could say. It then goes to exec, where we kind of question each other as to whether it's really needed. and then from there it's coming through to you. So it's gone through multiple layers of scrutiny, you could say. Yeah, happy to take questions, which I'll probably divert to the budget managers or the GMs.
Thank you for that, Councillor Campbell.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of questions. I see on the list some money for Mount Lee's homestead. I'd suggest that we should be getting on with that as soon as possible. The property's been empty for quite some time now, and it's no wonder we've had issues out there. So I suggest that one be progressed as soon as possible. The other question I did have was to do with the bylaws at the bottom of the list, $40,000 to spend on that. I just wondered what that money was going to be spent on. I would have thought that we could have handled that internally.
Michael.
It'll go to legal fees, external legal fees. We've already engaged Simpson Grierson to provide the support there, and Lisa provided an update on the work program for the bylaws for the remainder of this coming year at the last workshop.
Thank you. Councillor Humphrey.
Thank you. Two comments from me. One is just to, I guess, provide some feedback. I've already emailed Amanda directly, but just a suggestion. I found the information in this report somewhat difficult to compare with our quarterly reports and major project updates. So I've made some requests that will help us better analyse at a governance level, where projects are at in relation to completion and the budget component of that, because it can be quite difficult when you're just dealing with big buckets to identify what is actually necessary and the accuracy of our cash flow forecasting. My question is actually in relation to that. Thank you, Amanda, for giving us a reminder of the process that happens internally in terms of reviewing those carry forwards. What I'm unclear about is what discussion happens about the implications and impacts on that on our current annual plan work program and the overall capital program commitment. And the reason I ask that question is there are 0 projects in the infrastructure space that we've looked at or proposed carrying beyond next year, and that may well be entirely valid. But if I look back at last year's capital program, which came to a total of $60.8 million, which included the annual plan and previous carry forwards, we achieved 32.1 million of that, so about 53%. And if I look at this year's annual plan, which has 28.8 million work already committed, and these proposed carry forwards of an additional 23.5 million, we're looking at a $52 million program again. And, at a rough straw, if we were to achieve the same as we achieved this year, that still leaves us with $19.9 million worth of work that it's actually highly unlikely we're going to be able to deliver. So my question is, what level of comfort do the executive team have about our ability to actually deliver on this capital program? What's the rationale and justification for that?
Thank you. Shane, would you like to respond to that? Or Hamish?
Hamish can chip in after I say a few things. One of the key rationale of the current LTP was not to add any more to our CapEx, was to try and get everything done that we said we were going to do. We appreciated that we haven't quite been able to deliver on our CapEx programs over a number of years, and that those capital works were building on us. Add to that the additional projects brought through from the DIA funding, Ahakia Water, which wasn't foreseen. Then I agree, the list has got quite big. But in saying that, and Hamish chip in here, majority of those large projects are in progress. We've got, Ahakia Water well underway, probably over 50%, I'd suggest. The wastewater centralisation, the resource recovery centre, Mangaweka Bridge, Chandler's Road, as you're aware, is on hold because we've got difficulties with land purchase, although we are looking at how we might get around that. So there's a lot of work in stream that this year will come to fruition that sort of sat there as outstanding capital projects from last year. Hamish, you want to add anything?
Yeah, thanks, Shane. Yeah, and what you've said is exactly right in terms of those key projects. And I guess it is difficult to put a project into a nice sort of financial year. And so we do every year, we have a conversation around carry forwards. But those projects that Shane listed are essentially the big chunky items in there. There's obviously a small, well, there's a list of sort of, I wouldn't call them quite rats and mice, but a list of other projects and smaller components. But when you look at things like the Fielding Water Strategy, of which there are many components to it over many years, if you miss one for whatever reason, it does roll up. But once you look at those projects which are underway, which is a good chunk of the bigger items on the list, I have a level of confidence that we'll get through a good chunk of it. Will we get through 100%? I'm not gonna say absolutely, but we're certainly in a good place to deliver a really good chunk of that. We're not at a pre-design, pre-procurement, no contractor engagement kind of space. We're very much down the track with most of those works. And I've said before around in previous meetings around capital works delivery, the three key things really which we need to get over and out of the way first. One is landowner discussions and negotiations. The second one is resource consent consultation. And then dovetailing into that is also the iwi engagement. So those are the three key sort of front-end things before you can start making progress on capital works. And for all of those big projects, by and large, if those aren't the issues that are causing a delay, then the works are either contracted or underway. So, yeah.
I think it's important to add, and I just need to point this out, that I can't give guarantees on us delivering the CapEx under current conditions. Already the supply chain is starting to really take a hit. Listening to the associations on telly about the Auckland ports and Auckland moving freight at the moment. I suspect big delays, and if you haven't ordered your Christmas presents by now, it's unlikely you're going to get them if they're coming from overseas. So the other thing I have got concerns about is local resource. Unemployment's really low. I know there are companies in town who are screaming for employees and just cannot get them, especially in the trades area. And Te Āhua is now starting to suck up any spare civil capacity that we had. And talking to one of the project managers there yesterday, there's currently 100 vacancies on that project. So I think we haven't seen the constraints yet, but we are really going to hit them in the next 12 months.
So that, if I may, I guess, confirm some of the concerns I have. We've just identified a number of risk factors around delivering our capital work program. And so I guess the question for me is, so what, where to next? Does that necessitate a reforecasting? Having a look at those major projects that Hamish has identified, prioritising within that, looking realistically at supply chains. The reason I raise this is my concern is that our quarterly CapEx reports will have the potential to end up being relatively meaningless if we, continue to commit to a program that we know that there's a significant likelihood that we won't be able to deliver, and actually being able to monitor progress against more realistic forecasting, I think would be quite valuable.
Through your worship, if I could just add one more comment to that, and I think it kind of picks up both on Shane and Councillor Humphrey's points, and quite rightly, and I have said this before as well, but just as a reminder, our procurement process, we've largely tried to bundle works up where we can to make them more attractive in terms of attracting contractors and suppliers in, and also the sort of subsequent stage negotiation of works where we can. So once we have an existing tendered relationship with a contractor, if we can leverage off that using the essentially same unit rates where we can, we'll certainly look to do that. And an example is the wastewater centralisation, which is a separate project to the Ohakia Water, but you've got an overlap there of pipeline supply, and you've got an overlap there in terms of contractors who can dig and thrust pipes in the ground. So the team are working through at the moment, essentially doing a negotiated subsequent stage of the wastewater centralisation to pick up the Halcombe leg and the Rongatia leg, using the existing contractors that are on the two projects, being the existing Ohakia water project and the the wastewater centralisation project. And we were looking to bring those to council for recommendation in the next month or two. But instead of going back to the market and putting at risk of getting no tenders or paying a premium for the one tenderer that turns up at the tender box, where we can negotiate those subsequent stages where we've got a tendered basis already, that's exactly what we're continuing to do. And that's worked successfully for us over the last few years. So that helps to mitigate some of that risk. It doesn't obviously remove it, but that's an example of some of the things that we are trying to do to be able to deliver the works program. So.
Thank you. Councillor Marsh.
No, nothing from me.
Nothing from you, Councillor
No,
Quarry.
I was going to make a comment on the fact that given both Shane's and Hamish's comments, whether we should have had this item before our gambling venues discussion, because some of it's always a gamble when you're putting this capital works project in place as to whether you can fit it into the financial year. But yep, no, I think they covered it off very well. I see Andrew's got his hand up though.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Quarry.
Yeah, thanks very much. I was going to get back into the rats and mice. I see the carryover for the Himitangi June planting. We, I think, allocated $100,000 over every year for 3 years for that project. And I see that there's 50,000 on the first year to be carried over. I'd like an update in regard to the work that's been done there and the future projections for that.
Thank you.
Is Carl Johnston online?
I don't see him there, Michael.
Okay. I'll have to get back to you on the specifics of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Michael, you'll need to kick in.
Sorry. Right, any further questions? We do have a recommendation on page 71. Anyone like to move that? Well, I'll move that. Oh, sorry, I've missed your hand. I'll move that the council approve the requested financial carry forwards as listed on the 2021-22 requested financial carry forwards report, appended to the report, subject to the changes requested by audit, and that the council note the outlined funding sources for this funding. Is there a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Councillor Marsh seconded it. Any further discussion or questions? Or sorry, any further discussions? All those in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Those against? The motion is carried. Councillor Humphrey, would you like your vote recorded? I think that's a no, a muted no.
Sorry, no, I was shaking my head.
Right.
Thank you for that, Councillor Ford. Sorry, I just lost you there for a moment. Item 11.3, the Lagoina requests for August. They're all listed there with the supporting information that we requested with them. See, Shane, would you like to take us through those? Or Carol's, maybe Carol's.
Carol's there, yeah.
Thanks, Carol.
Yeah, so as you can see, for the month of August, there were 5. One of them was withdrawn, Bridge Market in the region. So 2 have been completed and 2 are still in progress. There were 2 obviously completed from the previous time as well. And like you said, there's more information this time because that was something that was picked up from previous conversations. So yeah, if there are any questions, then fire them through.
Thanks, Carol. So anyone, any questions or comments of any of those requests? No? If I've missed your hand, just please speak up. Otherwise, if there are none, we can, thank you for that, Carol, we can go to the recommendation on page 77. If I could have a mover and a seconder, please.
I'd be happy to move.
Oh, Councillor Short.
I'd be happy to move that. The report detailing the request for information received under the Local Government Official Information and Meetings Act 1987 for the month of August 2021 be received.
Thank you. Councillor Ford, I take that as a seconder. Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hand. Against? That motion is carried. Thank you so much. So we have no late items today, so that takes us straight.
Your Worship, can I, as you're aware, I did put a request in for a late item which was declined. So I'm just looking for a confirmation of our future plans on discussing the Government Three Waters proposals, and I understand from our CEO that will be put on the agenda for the next meeting. I'd just like a confirmation if that's the case, or any alternate plans, please.
Thank you, Shane.
There'll be a report coming to the next council meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So we move to public excluded, and I'm happy to move that the public be excluded from the following parts of the proceedings of this meeting, namely the confirmation of minutes. I'm happy to move that. Do I have a seconder, please? Please speak up if I can't see you. Councillor Ford. I seem to have lost people's faces. So Councillor Ford, are you happy to move that, second that one?
Yes, I second that.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? The motion is carried. Thank you.